Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes Live from Doors Open and Resident Advisor. My name is Martha, and for the next hour we're going to learn some more about music publishing. So to help me out, I've got a pair of experts here with me. So please welcome Saranne Reid, founder of Sample Clearance Services.
Hi.
And Dane Bradshaw from Ministry of Sound's Publishing Department. Hi.
Hey.
So we're going to look at the ins and outs of sampling and how music is licensed, and we're going to get an idea of what career options there could be within this area. But before we do that, let's get to know our guests a little better. So Saranne, how did you come into the music industry?
So I am a music lawyer and I used to run a record label. I've also worked on the publishing side and, in fact, on the management side and live side. So I've covered pretty much most areas of music licensing and IP rights.
Okay, and what was your journey to get into doing what you're doing today?
Right, ooh, that's a long journey. So I started running a nightclub. I was a DJ. I ran a nightclub, and then from the nightclub we took the DJs that were in that nightclub, and they were artists on our label. I then trained to be a lawyer while I was at the label because we didn't have anyone else to do the legal. They were like, Saranne, you need to go to law school. And actually, fundamentally, all rights in the music industry are about IP. It's intellectual property. It's exploitation of intellectual property. So I trained to be a lawyer whilst running helping to run the label. And then one of the biggest things about our label was that we were signing sample-based dance acts. And at the time, there was no agency available to help us do that, and we didn't understand how the rights would be granted. So we set up an agency, Sample Clearance Services, which outlived the label and is going strong now.
Okay, so give me an idea of what you do on a daily basis.
On a daily basis. So we look after the rights for lots of different companies like Universal Music, Google, YouTube, lots of independent acts, lots of DJs. So we would look after their compilation rights, their sample clearance rights, and sometimes it will be a matter of them coming and saying, I've made a track, please clear the sample in it. And sometimes it might be them saying, look, we want to license these tracks, we want to put out some content on our channel, can you license the rights for us?
Okay.
And there are other illegal aspects to things, but I won't bore you with those.
Okay, we'll get into those later maybe. So you weren't really intending to be a lawyer in the music industry, but it was sort of like a necessity.
Not at all. It wasn't I did an art degree, my first degree. It wasn't at all something I planned to do. But actually, when I worked in music, one of the things that became hugely apparent was that someone needs to learn how to regulate the rights. And music, whether you're a label or a publishing company or sync, it's all about a contract. It's contract law. So I went off to learn about those contracts.
Took one for the team.
Quite literally.
Okay. And Dane, how did you come to know about publishing? Like, did you know it was like a job option when you were in school?
No, I always wanted to work in music, but when I was choosing my degree and stuff, I originally wanted to do journalism, actually, so that's kind of how I started out. But it wasn't an option that I was aware of. It's just through time of working in the music industry, doing lots of different jobs in different kind of sectors, and then I was always interested in music placement, how did music make it to adverts and films and TV and games, and just ended up doing some research and speaking to some people, and then ended up kind of finding my way into publishing.
Okay, so how long have you worked at Ministry of Sound?
I've been at Ministry for a year, but I've been working in publishing for just over 4 years now.
Okay, wicked. So where were you before that?
So before Ministry, I was at Sony ATV for 2.5 years doing a similar role, doing creative pitching for sync, so pitching to advertising agencies and production companies. And before that, I was at Universal for a year learning the licensing side, which is the admin, the negotiation, and the contracting.
Okay, and what does your day-to-day look like now?
My day-to-day is quite varied. So there's an element of creative pitching, so I'll get briefs from advertising agencies or production companies or music supervisors who are looking for music for projects that they're working on. So it could be TV ads, could be online, could be internal kind of corporate content, and they'll send me a brief and give me an idea of what kind of tracks they're looking for, give me a reference, let me know if there's any key themes or words that needs to be in the music, or kind of BPM or stuff like that, or sonic kind of signatures that they're looking for the music. And then it's my job to kind of, so I work for Ministry's publishing office. We represent a catalogue of writers, so it's my job to pitch the music that I feel suitable from that catalogue to whether it be like advertising, film, TV clients. So there's that side of things. Then there's also kind of quoting and negotiation. So someone will be like, okay, we're thinking of using this track. How much would it cost us to use it for this amount of time in these territories? And it's my job to kind of retain like the integrity of like the copyright and make sure we're kind of not underselling stuff, but also not overselling it, and making sure we're getting a good fee for the artists. And then the other end of it is kind of the more social side or the fun side, which is like a lot of client engagement. So like taking people to gigs, just going into agencies and doing playbacks of new music or playing them music before it comes out, so they kind of have a heads up of what's coming out, so they can kind of see if there's projects that they can fit it into. Yeah, those are like the main things I'd say.
Okay, so that's kind of an idea of what you guys get up to on a daily basis, and I'm sure we'll find out more about what you guys do on a sort of normal day. But there's already some words flying around that I'm unsure of. So if you're watching at home, please comment and send us questions. If there's something that you don't know what it is, then just let us know and I will ask the guys for you. So can we please start with what is sync?
Okay, so sync is short for synchronization. So sync basically means any time a piece of music is put to picture. So, again, film, TV, games, advertising, online content. And sync essentially is trying to make sure that any type of music that's used for media is licensed correctly, artist is paid, the publisher or the label is also paid for the music. So I know we live in a time where music is essentially, it feels free because you just put on Spotify and the music's there. But when it's ever married with any type of media or visual, there needs to be, a license in place, needs to be paid for, and needs to be agreed by all the copyright owners that, we will charge you this amount of money to use this piece of music for this kind of project. So sync is just basically putting music to picture, and then the licensing side is the kind of the fun negotiation and legal side of it.
I like how you use the word fun.
Yeah.
So as an artist, coming up, do you think a good way of making money from your music is sync?
Yeah, absolutely. I think after live and touring and merchandise, sync can definitely help, especially emerging artists, help them in terms of financially, but also from a PR perspective, if your music gets on an advert or even something like, Love Island, there's loads of stories of upcoming artists getting featured on Love Island, their music getting put on Love Island, and the whole nation's watching it. Someone Shazams it, and then you found a new following just like that. So there's definitely a lot of scope, I feel, and artists and managers definitely seem to be a lot more cognizant of that now and want to push to get their artists on whatever film, TV and games. Maybe 10, 15 years ago when artists were just still making money from records, maybe not 15 years ago, maybe longer than that, maybe 20, 25 years ago, when artists, before downloads basically, when artists were making money solely from selling music, then people would be like, oh, we don't want our thing associated with a brand or with an ad. But now it's a viable route basically to get some money and also to get your music out there.
Okay, so would you be the example of someone who's in between the artist and the person who needs advert for their music for their advert?
Yeah, so anyone that's signed to Ministry Publishing, my job is to kind of go out and make sure the right people within the kind of media industry know the music, and also be a bit proactive and kind of maybe cherry pick maybe brands or advertising agencies that work with certain projects that I feel would be right for the artists that we represent.
So as a new artist coming out, would you be hoping that your manager will have you covered on the sync side of things, or is there a whole nother job for sync?
It depends really. So there's different ways to kind of, I guess, procure a sync. So if you're independent, you could have a sync rep, which is an independent company who works on your behalf and kind of does a similar thing to what I do and farms your music out to film companies and ad agencies and stuff. Or if you're signed to a publisher, most publishers will have a sync department or at least a sync person who's in charge of trying to license your music and get your music out there. Same thing with a record label. So both publishing companies and record labels, they both have sync departments. So if you're signed to a record label and a publisher, essentially you've got two people fighting for you to try and, you know, put your music out there and get your stuff out there. But I think if you're an independent artist with maybe no publishing deal or no record label, you can still, you yourself or your manager can still approach like an independent music supervisor, which there are like loads of in London and around the world, and kind of just get on their radar. It's kind of, I guess, like almost pitching your music to like a record label. It's like, here I am, this is what I do. They'll, you know, if they're into it, they'll usually give you some like honest feedback about it, and if they're into it, they'll keep your music on their like internal system or whatever, and if something comes up that they feel is right for it, they'll pitch it and then take it from there.
Okay, so how can we find those people if we've got music?
You can, there's quite a few companies in London, but obviously this is like a global thing. A Google search is quite effective if you type in music supervisor and your local town or your country that you're in, you'll be able to find some. Also probably just, you know, social media, everyone's got a page, you can kind of track some down. There isn't really like one portal to kind of find these people. They're all very like independent and they kind of operate in a very, it's like a niche within a niche. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's more of like a business to business thing where they're kind of more marketing themselves to advertising agencies and clients and then try and find the music afterwards. But yeah, there's not really like a one place you can kind of find them, I would say.
Yeah, okay. Oh, well, I'm feeling a bit better about sync now, so thank you. Saranne, can you talk me through the process of clearing a sample and why do we have to clear samples?
Okay, so basically a sample is when an artist takes an element of a different artist's work and embodies it in theirs. So when they do that, they have to go back to the original artist and effectively ask permission. Can I use your track in my track? And to do that, there are two distinct and separate copyrights. There's the copyright in the recording, which is usually owned by the original record label that put the track out. And there is the copyright in the underlying composition, which is the written part, which is usually owned by the publisher or the original writer. And when you use a sample, you need to go back to those two bodies and ask permission. And when you do that, it usually incurs a fee of some sort. And so a negotiation would take place where they would ask you for a percentage of your track on the publishing side and or in advance these days, unfortunately. And then on the master, on the recording side, they'll ask you usually for an advance and a royalty. So the negotiation takes place and the approval takes place with it, and then you would draft an agreement on each side, and then you're free to use somebody else's track within your track.
Okay, and at what point in the process would you say it's advisable to like get this sample checked out?
Oof, really early on.
Early as possible.
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, it's quite a lucrative income stream these days, sampling. So most people will want you to use their track, and also because it brings old tracks back to life, and you get a new audience. So they're usually quite happy to feature samples. But most samples have, because they have an author approval or a writer approval or an artist approval attached to them, they can sometimes be denied. Some of the old Motown writers and artists don't necessarily want their tracks made into drum and bass tracks, or that they are very precious about it. Or some of the old jazz musicians don't necessarily like house music attached to their tracks. So there is that writer approval. So you need to find out really early on, pretty much when you're at the demo stage of making music, as to whether that track will be cleared.
And if it's like a no, what are the repercussions?
If it's a no, it's a no. If it's a no, you mustn't use somebody's copyright, because you are then infringing their rights. I mean, it happens. People do use tracks, people do put out tracks, and they then upload them onto platforms, and then there's a backlash, because then the original writers or the original label can then come to them and they'll offer them this, well, they won't offer them, they'll tell them to cease and desist, so they have to take it off the platforms, they have to stop making the record, and then they'll usually take all of the copyright on both sides. So you've kind of made a track for somebody else, of which you will have no revenue or no share in. So it's not particularly wise to put it out without clearing it.
Yeah, better to check.
Better to check.
Okay.
It's hard because you've kind of got to make an investment by making the track in a studio before you can then find out whether it will clear or not. So that's quite a difficult proposition, I think, for most artists.
Yeah, you've got to keep that balance, I guess.
Yeah.
So where do you come in helping out with these types of processes?
So we work with when we work for the labels, we can find out at the earliest opportunity. So we have very good relationships with a lot of labels and publishers because we do this all day, every day. So we can say quite far in advance, does this track clear? Is there any chance this track, will there be any problems? And they will come back to us and say, yeah, this one doesn't, for example, Stevie Wonder doesn't want you to use this, so they can say that even before, if they know that there's a problem with that track, even before the track is made. Actually, anybody can find that information out if they go to the right people in the label and the publishing company. Because we do the same job every day, we can get things done quickly. We can get the agreements done, drafted quickly. Sometimes it's quite difficult for people to understand the terms of agreements without some kind of legal representation. So we can kind of ease that process, and we do it very cost effectively.
Okay, I like to hear it. So content licensing makes up a kind of big part of the industry. Could you please tell us exactly what that is and maybe give us an example, perhaps one of your clients?
Okay, so content is king, obviously, for everyone these days, and every artist, everybody, uses Instagram, uses Facebook, and everyone is using content on those platforms. The law is changing, and it's so slow to keep pace with it. But every time anyone posts any content, invariably there is music in the background, images in the background, and there is a copyright attached to all of that information. Sometimes if you include a bit of a film, a bit of a, something you've heard somewhere, a bit of radio, there's copyright attached to all those things. So anyone using content needs to check whether the copyright they're featuring is available to use, has been cleared. Some content is public domain, so you can use it freely, but most of it isn't. I work on behalf of YouTube and Google, and we do quite a lot of their events. And they use an awful lot of copyright in their content. And obviously, because they're such a global company, they have to clear every aspect, which means even a still, even a couple of words from someone's song has to be cleared. So lots of copyright. The law, in fact, has recently changed because lots of creators on YouTube have started their channels and use content and copyrighted work freely. And the law has said, well, actually, YouTube needs to be liable for those creators that are using copyrighted work, which has made it very difficult, I think, for creators because they won't start the channels if they can't use any material on those channels. So it's quite a big issue, I think.
And would it be a kind of thing where you get like a strike on your channel if you use something and it's detected?
No, it used to be that you could simply have a takedown notice. So you would use some copyrighted material, and then the owners of that material would then say, "Oh, that's my material," and you'd get a takedown notice. But unfortunately, because there was so much music being used on channels, the music companies were like, "Well, we're not getting paid. You're using the content. A takedown notice isn't enough because actually you've used all of our music, and because a lot of channels are paid, someone is generating income from music copyright that's not the actual owners of the copyright." So there was a big kind of hoo-ha about it, and they brought in an article, a European article, Article 13, and that has changed. And now platforms are liable for the infringements of the creators.
Okay, how recently did that come in?
It's quite recently, I don't know the actual date, but
Okay.
it's...
So do you think we've seen the effects of that already? Or was it
I think it's quite hard to police, actually.
Yeah.
I think the law is always so far behind everything. So I think technology will zip on and the law will be chasing its tail behind. But I think policing it is I don't know how that's going to happen. But I think YouTube and every other platform will just have to be tighter in their selection process and in how that they speak to their creators about how to use copyrighted material.
Sure. So Dane, is there a similar process in sync for like clearance?
The clearance process in sync is quite quite ingrained. It's very similar to like licensing something from YouTube, but essentially the way you'd go about it is if you wanted to clear a piece of music, you would contact the master owner, which is usually the record company, and you contact the publisher. So just to break it down as well, it might be confusing for people who haven't dealt with kind of music licensing before, but there are always two copyrights attached to like a sync license.
Okay.
So if you want to clear a piece of music, you have to clear the master recording with the label, and then you clear whoever's written the song, you clear their rights with the publisher. So it's like twofold and can be quite complex. So like if you wanted to use a piece of music on like an online video, let's say it's like a branded content thing, you would kind of get in contact with the sync person at the label or whoever owns the master and just set out the terms of what it is you're actually using it for, you know, what the content is, you know, ideally send them an example of it if you've already shot it or whatever, where it's going to live online. There's going to be like websites, socials, YouTube kind of thing. Is there going to be any paid spend behind it? What territories do you want it to live in? And then from that, they can, you know, the rights holder can generate an idea of how much it would cost. So you'd have to do that for the master owner, which is usually the record label, and you'd have to do it for the publisher.
Yeah.
And with publishing, it's a bit more complex because the publishing rights of any song it's always like 100%. But of that 100%, it's divvied up between, you know, the producer, the vocalist if they've written it as well. A lot of modern day pop music has lots and lots of co-writers on it. So, you know, there's like Kanye West tunes that have like 30 different writers on it because he's used 5 different samples, which have within those samples, they have 2 or 3 writers already. So that kind of just escalates things. So the harder part is probably clearing the publishing more than the master, because it's usually the master is just one person. So if Kanye West makes a song, his record label represents him for the master side. But then on the publishing, depending on who he sampled or how many people he's had with him making that track, it could be quite a lot. And you'd have to clear all of those people's rights individually. So not everyone is going to be published by the same company. So you'd have to go to all the different companies that publish all of the writers that are involved in the composition of the track and go through the same process and say, we're working on this project, we want to clear this is what we want to use it for. So it can end up being quite tricky sometimes.
And is the amount of money that's distributed between all those different voices, is that agreed when like the record is made, or is
it? So the percentages, they call them splits. So publishing splits. So on the basic level, if the producer has 50% and the artist has 50% of the publishing, then whatever fees, whether it's streaming royalties or a sync license, whatever money comes in for that track, they'll split it 50-50. Okay. But it's when you've got, you know, someone's got 5% or someone's got 12.5%, or, you know, someone, you know, a lot of like, maybe let's say like rap tunes and stuff, people might have just give their mates 5% because they were in the studio at that time. And so then when it comes to actually clearing that track, that person isn't published, that person isn't registered on any like performance, like PRS or anything like that. So you can't actually track them down. And then that could sometimes get in the way of something actually getting used.
Okay, would that stop it from getting used?
Yeah, well, yeah, because usually any company that wants to use, like, you know, a big company or any kind of company that's kind of using music, they want to make sure everything's like above board. So if there's one thing in the way, then they'll probably use something else. Yeah. Because you don't want to risk someone coming back to you like 5 years later saying, hey, you use this track, and if you don't have all your paperwork in order to prove that, you know, you've licensed it legally, then you're leaving yourself in a bit of a compromising situation.
Okay, so perhaps something for like young writers and musicians to note is like get your paperwork in order.
Yeah, get your paperwork in order. Try not to sample if you don't have to, because it just makes everything a lot. I'm not trying to say
put me out of work.
But you know what I mean? Like, be creative.
So would there be an example of a time where you guys' roles like cross over, or you would work like together?
Maybe if there's an uncleared sample, if someone has maybe made a track and it hasn't, there's a sample in it that hasn't been cleared, and then maybe someone wants to use it for an ad or for a film or something, and then might have to use someone like Saranne to get it done like quickly if, you know, if there's like a lot of money on the line, or if it's something that you want to get done quickly. I'm probably in that kind of situation, I'd assume.
We work with sync teams because we act on behalf of Google. and they do a lot of advertising campaigns, and they do parties, and whenever they use content that needs to be cleared, we would need to come to a sync body, or as in Dane's case, because it's ministry, we'd come to the owner of the copyright to clear the rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about the kind of scope of your clients, because you've got people from like monsters like Google, but then you have like small artists or up and coming artists.
Yeah, because although our company name is Sample Clearance, we actually do licensing across the board, or different scales of licensing. So we might be doing a compilation for someone like Tiesto or Swedish House Mafia, or we might be doing a sample clearance for a really small independent who's self-releasing. He's still got to clear his rights. Everybody's got to clear their rights. No matter how big or small you are, you've got rights to clear. And invariably, it's something that you need a hand with. So yeah, we work on the grassroots right up to the big conglomerates.
Okay. I'm going to ask, what is a publisher, which may sound like an obvious question, but let's just get it out there.
Okay, a publisher looks after writers of composition. So the label looks after the artist. So I'll give you like a little example. So like Rihanna is the artist, so she'll be signed to Sony Records, but then a lot of her songs, she has people writing for her in the background. The publisher will look after those people and collect their money, collect the royalties from streams and whatnot. So essentially a publisher is there to kind of exploit your music, get you, sync deals, also sort out A&R sessions through A&R, and basically collect your royalties. The difference is, I guess, there are a lot of people that make music that are producers, writers, who are not performers. So the record label will look after the performers and the publisher will look after the writers and the composers. So what's good about publishing is that if you're just a producer, all you want to do is produce. You don't want to be in front of the cameras. You want to just be in the studio. You want to make music. That's where a publishing deal could be really beneficial, because, if you've got the right music and the right whatever thing at the time, they can try and push you and put you in the right places. There's a lot of, especially like with bigger pop songs, there's demos that just fly around. So someone might have written a song, and then they'll send it to, an artist manager and be like, here's like a mid-tempo ballad that I've written. This might work well for whoever your artist is if they're looking for songs. There's a whole kind of world of just, exchanging songs. But that person who's written a song will always get, they'll get publishing splits, they'll get money from it. It's not just you sell a song to someone. If you've written it, you'll kind of agree the publishing splits at the time when they decide to cut the track. And then, every time that song gets played, every time that song gets licensed on a piece of media, whoever's written it will always get, depending on what percentage they've agreed on, will always get a cut of the money. So it's quite a lucrative and interesting way for people who just either write the actual lyrics, or producers who make compositions but don't necessarily want to be front line.
Yeah, and to work in publishing, what kind of skill set would you need?
I guess it kind of depends. So publishing does kind of mirror a label in the sense that there's A&Rs who are looking for talent. There's still kind of the legal, the finance side of it. There's a sync side, which I kind of do. So it has pretty much all the similar facets of a record label, apart from maybe like marketing and advertising. That's more of a label thing because they're trying to sell the records at the time it's out. But yeah, the skill set, I think it's more, it is, you want to have a passion for music. You want to be publishing is very detail oriented as well. So I think having those kind of skills, having an eye for detail, knowing a little bit about just music rights and how it works. So, for example, the difference between a publisher and a label. But I think you've just got to have the right attitude and just kind of want to get on and learn. I started in publishing 4 years ago, but before that I was doing PR. Before that I was doing radio production, and before that I was doing journalism. I was kind of finding my way through different facets of music whilst there was economic recession. So I kind of couldn't really find a permanent job in one place, so I kind of had to move around and try different things. But I kind of started from the bottom, at the age of 28, and just kind of did free work experience for a bit, and kind of through that you meet people and and just learning on the job as well. And then after that, I kind of got my first role at Universal, and then learned a lot in like a short period of time at just different terms and the little the terminology and everything that gets used in like contracts and licensing. And yeah, it was because I was just generally interested in it, and I felt it was like a good skill to have at this point, because it just felt like music changes so quickly now. But I think something like publishing is always going to be very important to artists and their careers, and yeah, it's not going anywhere. So it was kind of, for me, it was like a good thing to try and get into.
For sure. And did you go to uni?
Yeah, I went to Hertfordshire University. But I did like a combined honours, so I did like one module media, one module journalism, one module history, one module creative writing. So that was at the stage when I still wanted to do journalism.
Yeah.
But I was always doing music on the side. I was doing like freelance journalism at the side. Like that was when blogs were happening back in the day.
So would you say that your degree is like essential for what you do now?
I wouldn't say so, but I would say probably a degree in maybe like music law, or a degree in like music business would be very beneficial to someone if you wanted to kind of get into like the publishing and sync side, because it's just good to know all the facets. Also, if you want to do management and stuff like that, all that stuff's really handy. So mine wasn't like directly related to my to the career that I'm in now, but whilst I was studying, I was still doing internships, working for free, doing work experience, and just going out all the time, being involved in music on the side as well.
Okay. And Saranne, for someone to work with you at Sample Clearance, would you look for someone that has a degree or experience?
Interest in music is, I think, paramount to anyone who wants to work in any part of the music industry, because that's where it starts. You've got to love what you do. And if you're interested in music, if you're a DJ on the side, if you set up your own, event or whatever, that's the key to working in music. Once you get in and get some work experience, you can find your feet, you can find which area appeals to you. I don't know if you wanted to necessarily at the beginning you find your way in.
Yeah.
I didn't go in thinking, I'm going to be a lawyer. That's what I fancy. It was because I was a DJ and I really love music. And I think you get in and then you find out which bit appeals to you, whether it's, whether you feel more on the creative side and you want to go into A&R, or whether you're driven by the technical side, you want to do contract law, then you'll find your feet once you get in. But I think, first of all, have the love for music, and it really, really matters, because it's a 24-hour job. You're out all night and you're at work all day. So I think that's the key to it. And then if you decide that you want to work on the licensing side, you can go in at 3 different levels. You can go in on the copyright side, where you're looking after the copyrights, and that you don't necessarily need a legal qualification for. You can go into the sample clearance side, which you don't necessarily, again, need a legal qualification for if you work in-house, or you can go to business affairs, where you do probably need to be a lawyer. Okay.
And in your company, what are the roles aside from your role?
So we have someone doing social media, who, again, it's more about an understanding of music and how music works, because it's the content that we post. We have someone looking after sort of clients and business development. We have the legal side, which I do, and then we have someone just doing the legwork, keeping all the copyrights in order, making sure the contracts are in order. So there's all different levels within it.
Okay. And I just want to ask, so that we've definitely got it out there, how do you license music?
So very, very basically, you license music by going to the owners of the copyright, whether it's on the publishing side or whether it's on the recording side, making your proposal or asking them if you can use it on what terms they would like to license that music to you, and then you would normally draft a heads of agreement of the terms you're agreeing to license on, and then down to a full contract.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And I would always kind of advise to try and give yourself as much time as you can go through that clearance process, because depending on who you're talking to, whether it's a major publisher or an independent publisher, stuff can take time sometimes. So
much time, actually.
You want to give yourself, don't leave it to the last minute, which most people do, because they think, it's just music, whatever. They do everything else and you always leave the music to the last. So it kind of gets in the way of stuff sometimes. So getting in there early is probably like the best.
Because it's a
best
third
way.
party approval. So when you license rights, for example, if we were acting on behalf of someone, we would go to the record label or the publisher, and then they in turn have to go to a third party to gain approval. And that process will take time. And sometimes it can be turned around in a couple of days, and sometimes it can be turned around in a couple of months. And sometimes it can take a really long time, especially where there's lots and lots of different rights holders attached to one copyright. So always give yourself time. And in fact, producers never give themselves time.
No.
They always go, putting that out next week, can you get it cleared?
Yeah.
And you're like, eh.
Okay, if you just joined us, we are talking about music licensing. We have Dane from Ministry of Sound and Saranne from Sample Clearance, and I'm Martha. If you have any questions for any of the guys, then please let us know, give us a shout in the comments. So let's talk about what jobs there are around you guys' jobs and jobs that you've kind of seen similar to your field. What jobs are available in the world of music licensing?
So there is...
So I guess, there's like my job. So I'm head of sync at Ministry's publishing office. So essentially I'm a sync person within a rights holder. So all publishers would have a sync person.
And the labels
will also have a
sync
sync person. And then within that, I deal with independent music supervisors a lot. So there's a lot of agencies that kind of work on behalf of advertising companies, TV companies and film companies, and then would come to someone like me and say, we're looking for a piece of music, what have you got? Sorry. There's the music supervisors. Also, within ad agencies, there's the producers who actually work on the content, and that involves some, clearing the music and getting involved in the music as well. And kind of as I mentioned earlier, like A&R, legal, marketing,
copyright. So in a major label or a major publisher, you'll always have someone who's looking after the copyrights of the artist, making sure they're registered properly and all that kind of thing. So there's that level.
What other parts of it are there? I guess people that work at like PRS, that's kind of more copyright based.
So the right, when you make a copyright, you register so that you can collect all your revenue. You will register your rights with the PRS, MCPS, and the PPL, which are collection societies who collect all your revenue, and they have reciprocal deals around the world with other collection agencies. So they'll collect your revenue, you pay them a fee. You become a member of the body, and they'll collect. When your music gets played on like a radio station or a stream on a streaming service, they're the ones who actually track it, record it, and then you get paid. Was it 2-3 times a year they send you like a statement? Twice a year.
Twice a year they'll send you a statement with, all right, this is how much your music's been played on wherever. And every country has a different right society, so you have to be registered with, the one in Australia, the one in France, the one in England, and they will all kind of just collate your data and give you a breakdown and a check of how much your music has or hasn't been played.
Okay. I think the UK, if you register with the PRS in the UK, they'll have reciprocal deals with all the other ones, so they'll collect all the revenue for you.
That is good. Signing up to every single country would be a bit mad. Okay, so in the UK we have PRS, and you mentioned PPL. Is that something different?
Yeah, so the PRS is the money that's collected for the copyrights in relation to the publishing, and the PPL is the money that's collected for your performance of your track. Okay. So if you go out and do a live tour, then all the revenue that is generated on the performing side will be collected by the PPL.
Okay.
Which is very important to register with PPL. People never do.
Essential stuff. Okay, we're going to get into you guys' questions very soon, but I just wanted to know, like, from an artist point of view, we've kind of covered, like, what you need to do if you're going to go out on tour, what you kind of need to do if you're going to clear a sample or avoid or not. Leaving enough time is important. And we've talked about what sample clearance is. So one other thing that I was going to ask about was, do you have an example of a successful time when someone has like retrospectively cleared a sample with your help?
Well, now. So artists aren't supposed to retrospectively clear anything. And because the weak position that you're in, weak negotiating position you're in, it's never a good idea. But in the climate we're in, where it's very difficult for artists, inevitably they do sometimes have to put their tracks out. So some of the artists we work with will release an album on Bandcamp or something like that. Mm-hmm. That will then get exposure through Bandcamp or through a platform. And then from that, they will then get signed. And this is the strange dichotomy, is that then once they're signed and can then afford to clear their samples, they then go back to the sample owners, and the sample owners take all of the revenue. So it's a really, really difficult position for an artist to be in, because at the time in which they would initially want to clear the sample, they maybe can't afford to, because every time you clear a sample, there'll be an advance attached to each sample you use. So they put their tracks on Bandcamp, and then a big major comes along and goes, oh, what a great album. And then they sign it, and then they would then clear the tracks, but then you get stung because you haven't cleared it in the first place. So it's a really difficult position for an artist to be in. One of the ways around that is for artists to replay the material and just clear the publishing. So if you are, and not all artists can, not all artists want to, but if you use a piece of copyright and you are able to go back into the studio and recreate that sound, or re-sing the sound, or get some backing vocals in and get the sound remade, then you effectively make a new master, and then you don't have to clear the master side of that track.
Okay.
You only have to clear the publishing side. And the publishing side is usually a division of copyright, so there's not a fee attached to it. So that's kind of one of the ways to circumnavigate the expenditure side of sampling.
Okay, I see.
And in fact, in dance music, it's used all the time, because those guys are doing it track by track, and they'll go into the studio, they'll make a track, they'll get someone to re-sing the track, re-sing the sample, and they'll just clear the publishing.
So would you need to change it a bit when you're re-singing it, or is it literally...
No, because the master itself, when you're clearing the master rights, you're just literally clearing the rights to use that recording, that recording of the song.
Right.
The other rights, the publishing rights, you'll still need to clear.
Okay.
And that, if you wanted to use a sample and you didn't want to clear the publishing, then you'd have to change the note order and the word order and everything else. But if it's just for the recording, you just get someone to re-sing. It's a bit like if you do a cover. If you want to do a cover of someone else's song, you cover it, you re-sing it, and then you just clear the publishing. Publishing revenue goes back to the original writer.
All right, so that does give you less work to do, basically.
It gives me less work to do, but for quite a lot of artists, it's a cost-effective route to. I mean, we still clear the publishing, so we're still working.
Yes.
But it's a cost-effective way of using samples, especially when they're grassroots level or they're underground and they haven't got a big pile of money to throw at their album at that stage.
Okay, well, I feel like we've covered things from the up-and-coming artist point of view. What about for young people who are really business-minded and really have big aspirations for working in jobs like you guys? What would you give as one really solid piece of advice?
I'd say just do your research and just make sure, there's so much now that's kind of possible, because, the internet just opened up so many opportunities and so many different, even just job titles and things that, there is a wealth of options out there for young people. So I would say, use these tools that are at your fingertips, do your research, and just speak to people. Don't be afraid to ask people questions or just hit people up, whether it's on social media or just send them an email. Just, as long as you come with good intentions and you're just genuinely interested in what they're doing or wanting to learn, 9 times out of 10 you'll get a response at the very least, and someone will be like, oh yeah, hey, this is what I do, or this is how I got to where I got to. I think as long as you're genuine about it, most people will be quite happy to kind of just give you some advice. Because when I was starting out, I was just hitting people up via email, just being tell them about my passion in music and what I've done before, and then just asking them out for coffees and stuff, just interested in what you're doing. I would just like to learn more. And from there, stuff can happen.
Network. Huge. That whole industry is about networking. Every available opportunity, whether it's the Great Escape, whether it is any conference that's, music led, and there's so much for students and for young people out there that is free. You don't necessarily have to buy a delegate pass for. Go to those places, speak to as many people as possible, because that is part of our industry, and people get to know people, and people want someone who's enthusiastic and someone they like. And if there's a job opening, then they're gonna come back to you.
Wicked. Okay, we're going to go to the questions from everyone on the stream. So someone says, I'm managing a techno label for 4 years now with digital releases, and I've always been wondering if I should have created some kind of contract with my artist about who's the owner for what and how long for. What do you have to say about that?
Yes. Yes, you probably should have done.
Okay, for someone in that situation, can they go back? Is it a retrospective possibility?
I don't 100% know the facts there, but if he is the label owner, then presumably he would have a recording contract with the artist, I'm hoping, some kind of 50-50 deal or something with the artist, so that the recording would belong to the label. That's generally how it works. If he hasn't got that, then let's have a little bit of a fight there to get to find out who owns those rights. But yeah, even if it's just a one-page, you sort of them saying, we're going to put this track out for you and therefore the rights will vest with the record label. I don't know how the publishing will sit there, presumably. The publishing rights may in fact be owned. If he's the label owner, he wouldn't necessarily own the publishing, and the publishing would stay with the writer of the track, which would be the artist in that instance, I would imagine, or the producer.
Okay. Another question says, do licenses on music expire?
Yeah, for sync, definitely. You agree a term. So that's part of the that's part of the deal. So you agree where it's going to be used, for how long it's going to be used, whether it's like 6 months or a year. And the fee is kind of, based on how long you want to use it for. So technically, once that expires, say like if it's a TV thing, then it shouldn't be on TV after that time. Online is different because, stuff stays online. So a lot of time you will agree that after the term has expired, unless you want to relicense it and pay again, you can't put any like promotion behind it. It's kind of it will just sit on your pages, but it won't be promoted or put any ad spend behind it.
Okay.
So yeah, there is definitely like a term.
Yeah, the key there is term.
Yeah.
In any license agreement, one of the clauses in that agreement will be the term, and the term will be whatever you agree between you and the rights owner that you're able to exploit that copyright.
All right. Someone says, I'm about to start a writing camp where we'll be working with different artists, and I'm conscious of how we decide on splits. How can I ensure the publishing splits are equal on PRS, and are there benchmarks in how much a producer should be asking for?
They need to agree that right away.
Yeah.
It's such a difficult thing because in a creative environment, you don't necessarily want to get business on each other. You're sitting around, you're making tracks, and you don't want to talk about that side of it. But it's so important at that very early stage to decide what allocations you're going to have, who's going to take 50%, 20%, whatever. It's so important. With producers, it's very much dependent on the producer. Some producers will take 3%. It really varies. On the recording side, they'll take 3% in advance.
Yeah.
On the publishing side, it can be up to I've just
50.
done a deal for 50%. Yeah. But then a lot of it's to do, especially if there's a sample in the track. A lot of it is to do with on the publishing side is to do with how you want to split it up. If a producer takes 50% of a track that's got a massive sample in, then it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So it's an agreement between the parties,
Okay.
but get it on paper as soon as possible.
Sweet. What's the permitted size of the sample use that you don't need clearance?
The 3 second
It's
rule.
3 seconds, yeah.
There's no amount of sample. There's none.
Does that not
It's
exist?
not. It's
No?
absolutely
No 3 second rule.
It's a complete
Okay.
You are not allowed to use anyone else's copyright ever without permission.
There we go. That's officially cleared up.
Answered.
Can you explain what mechanical royalties are and when are they paid?
So this is like back to the PRS thing. Mechanical royalties is for streaming. Also, if you get an ad or anything on television, there are some underlying mechanicals that get paid outside of the sync fee as well. So yeah, mechanicals is just for anything. It's hard to describe actually, but yeah, stuff like streaming, radio play, TV airplay as well is streaming and is mechanicals, and you'd get that twice a year in your royalty payment from PRS.
Okay.
So yeah, for any artists and stuff, if you want to make sure you're getting your mechanicals, make sure you sign up to PRS as a member, and register properly. And anytime you release a new piece of music or whatever, make sure you upload that to PRS so they can track it.
Right.
And then pay you
Okay.
once any money comes in.
Why is it called mechanicals?
Don't know. It's always been.
Copyright and the mechanical side of it.
So it's like anything that comes like not
It's
from
actually
live.
all revenue now, pretty much, because everything's streamed.
Yeah.
So there's very, very few bits that aren't
guess-
covered within that.
Yeah.
I think because it used to be you used to have record sales, but it's changed now. So it's just pretty much most revenue I think now comes from mechanicals.
Yeah.
That's not live.
Okay, most revenue. All right. Someone says, I hear a lot of free samples and packs are out there. For anyone using these, are they really free to use?
No.
And if so, what's to stop anyone using them and then attributing their sample to what they've released? A good example is because I've noticed this actually happens with Apple Loops.
Okay, so there are sample packs, and there's lots of sample packs available. And if you go onto YouTube, they're available. You have to look at the terms and conditions of that sample pack. Invariably, the sample pack will say you can utilise this music in your bedroom when you're making in your studio when you're making the track. But if you want to exploit it afterwards, then you have to go to the copyright owner and pay a fee.
Okay.
We've worked with a lot of producers who are starting to use sample packs all the time, and there are a few that are out there that actually are copyright free, where the tracks have been made almost like a library piece of music, where the tracks have been made to be utilised, and there is no copyright attached to it. And it's usually the sort of drum loops and sort of loops and stuff like that. Those are free to use, but you must look at the terms and conditions because generally they are packs to make music in a room, not to exploit music.
Right. So if I downloaded a drill sample pack at home and made an anthem and it popped off, would I then need to just double check that?
You need to go back to those terms and conditions. When you buy the sample pack for 30 quid or whatever it is, go back and read the terms and conditions, which will be usually on wherever you purchase it from. And it will say in there whether it's available to be exploited or not. If it says you can exploit it, then it's free to exploit.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, then you need to go back to the rights owner of that track and clear the copyright.
Got to clear that copyright.
Got to clear that copyright. It's someone else's piece of work. And what you have to remember all the time is when you use a sample, you're effectively using someone else's piece of work within your work. You may have made a great banging new tune, but you've still used someone else's copyright to achieve that process. So you have to pay your dues. You have to go back and give them compensation for using their track.
It makes sense. For sure. Okay, I think that's about all we have time for. So Dane and Saranne, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you so much everyone who is watching today. We'll catch you next time.